Honestly, I promise they don't care where you sit. Most therapists have multiple seating options specifically to make you more comfortable, not less. So just sit wherever you want. You're not going to fail before you even start, I promise. Hello guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'm Megan, and welcome back to Healing Unscripted, the YouTube channel for accessible and relatable mental health content. Now let's dive on into what you can expect from your very first therapy appointment. The first piece of advice I have to give you on setting up an appointment with a therapist is probably going to be a little bit annoying, but I promise it is so essential, and here it is. Call, don't email. I know it's so tempting to email. So many of us with anxiety really struggle with phone calls, and I do understand that. But if you need to get in to see someone relatively quickly, calling is definitely your best bet. If you decide to email, if you find the therapist's email address and you decide to go that route, that's okay. A lot of times they'll get back to you. It just might take a little longer. But sometimes they won't get back to you at all, which is very frustrating. But as someone who has seen many, many therapists in my lifetime and has had to do this process over and over and over, I have found that I almost always get better results when I call instead of emailing. Speaking of getting in to see someone relatively quickly, that may not always be an option even if you do call, unfortunately. You see, a lot of therapist offices have very long wait lists that can range anywhere from maybe a week or two to several months. This is incredibly frustrating, especially if you're in the middle of a crisis. If that's the case for you, please don't wait. Please check out the hotline linked in the description below. Another little tip for when you're setting up your first appointment is to have a little blurb prepared about why you want to start therapy or why you want to start therapy with a new therapist. A lot of times the receptionist on the phone with you setting up the appointment will ask something along the lines of, "So what brings you in?" or "What do you want to seek therapy for?" If you're not prepared for this question, it can catch you totally off guard, and sometimes you're left floundering with absolutely no idea what to say. I know the first time I scheduled an appointment, I was asked this, and I hemmed and hawed, and I have no idea to this day what I said to this person on the phone. That being said, even if you do have a little blurb prepared and you end up crying and blubbering on the phone to the receptionist, please don't beat yourself up about it. This receptionist has probably seen it all, and you are not weird for opening up to someone who asks you how you're doing. Finally, on a practical note, when you call, make sure to triple check that they accept your insurance, not only the practice, but this particular practitioner. Sometimes the practice in general will take your insurance, but there are specific practitioners that won't. Found that one out the hard way. If you don't have great insurance, I totally get it. A lot of Americans are underinsured, which is basically when you have a really crappy health plan that makes getting access to healthcare, especially mental health care, very difficult. If that's the case for you, check out this video on 4 ways to find affordable therapy. Now let's talk about what to bring with you to your therapy appointment. If you like to journal, I highly recommend bringing your journals with you. I find that at the first therapy session, it can be really hard to access those emotions that you know you want to bring up, you know you want to talk about, but all of a sudden your mind just goes completely blank. If you bring your journals along with you, you can sort of flip through them and maybe read passages or just give the therapist the gist. If you have issues with your mood or with triggers, I highly recommend also keeping a mood tracker and a trigger tracker. And if you don't have one of those already, I have a pre-made one ready for you at the link in the description. Tracking your mood and your triggers is a really great way to see where you are and how you're handling things. And eventually, it's a really great way to track your progress. At your first appointment, it's so helpful to be able to bring in a mood tracker and say, look, I tracked my moods for the month of January, and I noticed this pattern, and you and the therapist can work together on those things. Speaking of tracking, if there's a specific diagnosis that you're pretty convinced that you have, but you're a little worried the therapist isn't going to take you seriously, I highly recommend keeping a diagnosis diary. This is basically a binder full of everything relating to you and this diagnosis and linking them together. Now, should you have to diagnose yourself? Absolutely not. A good clinician is going to see the things that you see. But the thing about mental health is that it relies heavily on self-reported symptoms. And if you have trouble organizing your thoughts about the symptoms you're experiencing, it can be hard to get the right diagnosis. That is where the diagnosis diary comes in. So what should you keep in this diagnosis diary? I recommend printing out studies that relate to the symptoms you're experiencing. I recommend keeping an Excel sheet tracking the symptoms you experience, how they impact your daily life, and how you're coping with them already. Finally, it might seem silly, but it's okay to bring in YouTube videos and TikToks even that you relate to or you feel explain the way that you're feeling really well. Sometimes we don't have the words to describe our experience, and it's okay to borrow other people's. Now let's talk about what to expect when you first get there. When you first get there will likely be a waiting room. Sometimes there's a receptionist desk. If there is, you should go there first. Simply give your name and the time of your appointment, and they will likely be able to look you up. From there might be some paperwork to fill out or insurance to verify, and the receptionist will usually be able to guide you through that process. Just so you know, they may ask for your insurance card and payment up front, so make sure you bring your insurance card, of course, and a form of payment. Finally, I highly recommend bringing something entertaining to do while you wait because it can be very nerve-wracking to just sit in the waiting room of your very first therapy appointment, just twiddling your thumbs, feeling the anxiety bubble up inside of you. Bring something distracting. Make sure you've got games downloaded on your phone or bring a really engrossing book. Okay, now let's talk about how most appointments start. Honestly, seriously, you are allowed to sit wherever you want. Most therapist offices will have several different seating options, and it's okay for you to choose whichever one you want. You're not taking the therapist's seat. They are content to sit wherever you are not sitting. Next, fair warning, they almost always ask, "How are you?" Which is infuriating because it's therapy, right? Like, am I supposed to answer that honestly? Because that's like an intense way to start the conversation. Or am I supposed to just say, "Yeah, I'm fine, thanks," except I'm in therapy, so I'm clearly not feeling fine. It's perfectly okay to go either way here. If you're feeling awkward and uncomfortable, just say, "Fine, how are you?" Not a big deal. If you are feeling particularly vulnerable and you just are not interested in faking it right now, feel free to explode. Let it all out. Just tell them how you're truly doing. I also want to say, if you didn't verify your insurance or pay up front in the waiting room with the receptionist, when you get in to see the therapist, double check that they take your insurance. Just check right away. Trust me, it's way better to get that stuff out of the way, to triple check, to make super sure, than to end up with a bill you can't afford. Typically, therapists will start sessions by asking what brings you there, and this is where you can recite a prepared blurb, you can bring out a journal and show them exactly how you've been feeling, or it's okay to just burst into tears. I've honestly done all three of these. Okay, so now let's talk about what to say and what not to say at your first therapy appointment. Honestly, I think it's okay to be as open or as guarded as you want during that first session. Honestly, the main goal of the first session is to build rapport, to start to feel comfortable together. If you feel comfortable around people by opening up to them, by being a little bit vulnerable and learning to trust them, that's perfectly fine. If you like to get acclimated to people more slowly, that's fine too. If you are just at your breaking point and you need to walk into this office and have a breakdown, that's fine. The only real rule when it comes to what to say and what not to say in your very first therapy appointment is to say whatever you're comfortable with. Be as honest as you want to be. Be as open as you want to be. And do your best to ignore the pressure to be more or less open. You're not failing at therapy. The first session is hard. It's awkward and weird, and that's okay. That's part of the package. That's part of the deal. I think it's also important to talk about how therapy sessions end. If you've never been to therapy before, you might feel really uncomfortable at the end of a session. What do I say? I just bared my soul to this person. How do I leave? Let's go over it. Typically, a therapist will wrap up a session by asking how you're feeling, asking how you're doing in this moment. Do you feel grounded? Do you feel safe? Next, they'll ask if you want to schedule your next appointment. Sometimes. Other times, that might be the receptionist's job. If you hated this therapist and you need them to know how bad they are at their job, feel free to let them have it. Tell them how you really feel. It's okay. You're not going to see them again. If they weren't your cup of tea, but you're not exactly in the mood to tell somebody off right now, feel free to just ask, "Hey, can I call to schedule my next appointment?" And then just don't call. Therapists are used to getting ghosted. It's okay. Finally, if you liked them, that's great. Go ahead and schedule your next appointment, or if you're uncomfortable, the same thing applies. Just say that you'll call and you'd like to schedule one that way, and then just actually call. Last but not least, if you didn't pay when you first walked in, you will likely pay at the end of your session. Mental health care is a little bit different from regular health care, where you usually wait to get an explanation of benefits before you pay the bill. With mental health care, you usually end up paying at the time of service. This is frustrating that it's different, and I couldn't exactly tell you why. I'm not an insurance expert, but I can tell you from experience that this is the way it works like 90% of the time. Okay, last but not least, we have to talk about how to take care of yourself after a therapy appointment. You can expect to feel tired, drained, sad, angry, a whole host of emotions. Or you might feel completely numb. All of these reactions are completely okay and normal. I say make a plan to treat yourself. Make a plan ahead of time. After my therapy appointment, I'm going to go get that fancy coffee. I'm going to take the rest of the day off work. Just do something that tells your brain we did a good thing today and we deserve a reward. Personally, I like to come home from therapy, curl up with a nice soft blanket, turn on Gilmore Girls, and just cry. Crying is a release for me. And I really need that after therapy, after doing that hard work. For other people, crying is the hard work and they don't want to do it, and that's okay too. However you de-stress after your therapy appointment is completely fine. Just make sure you have a plan to de-stress, because it is probably going to be stressful. If all of this sounds okay, but you're not really sure you're ready for therapy and you'd rather try something a little bit different, I recommend giving coaching a try. I'm a certified emotional intelligence coach, and I would love to work with you. Check out the link in the description to find out more about how we can work together. And as always, thank you so much for watching. It means the world to me to know that you're out there. And if you liked the video, make sure you like and subscribe.